Do I know any players on Seattle?
I don't know.
Is Jordan Morris
They've been
Seattle?
going through like an injury crisis too, apparently.
We can give me like 72 hours to come up with a who's on first bit about you saying names, and we just go who? Who's playing right back? Yeah, that's right.
That really was the most like noteworthy thing about Cooperstown to me. How into that bit they were. Every establishment.
Is that that must be the only baseball bit.
Did they first perform it in fucking Cooperstown or something in like vaudeville days or something?
I think it must have just been it's just that it's open. What do we call it? Open domain. Yeah. It must be, right?
As opposed to all the like Hollywood movies.
Yeah, Big Abbott and Big Costello are feuding each other, so they're not able to, ring up Senator Leahy and get him to appear in Abbott Costello, live action.
They're incensed
to renew the license.
That they could not expand the Who's on First cinematic universe.
Yeah. We need a what movie? We need a...
I don't know movie.
Yeah. We need to see... Baseball will not have made it in America until there is a Chris Pratt playing who? Danny DeVito playing what?
And Timothy Chalamet playing, I don't know.
Oppenheimer, Barbie, Who's on First?
And I wish I could like keep going, but I don't remember
the outfielders.
Yeah, was Fridays like the days of the week become part of it?
There's
right?
a catcher, right?
Presumably, I would think. I think there's a whole
lineup.
There's no DH though, as there should be, because they would have to say the natural question would be what, which I guess doesn't work.
It's Alex.
Well, it's episode 247 of View from 202, and sorry to all the haters and losers out there, but we're back. We did not get trapped upstate. We did not drive off the road. We were not poisoned, although the water at our place tried. But the three of us who went upstate, Brit, Peaches, and Cork, made it back, and Sam held down the fort here and joins us again remotely. Sam, how are you doing?
Same old.
Oh no, you're about to get hit by a car.
Just barely missed.
That'd be bad timing.
Did you all go up for the Hall of Fame game, or is that a different weekend?
That's a different. We just went up for just general Hall of Fame.
We went up before everything opened.
Yeah, like the week before.
Nice.
But it might have been the perfect timing because we avoided the crowds.
Right.
Like the museum and stuff was open.
And like the weather was nice. I mean, it was that early, or I guess late spring at this point. Kind of vibes. Getting green upstate. Did some hiking. Did some other kind of miscellaneous Catskills foolishness.
Got some pretty made coffee.
Yeah, the coffee across the board was pretty weak, I have to say. Unfortunately, the food was up and down. I think we had some better meals than other. Phoenicia Diner on the way back hit though. Yeah, that was a big hit.
Big shouts to Phoenicia Diner if you're ever in the Phoenicia metro area.
Which you would know because people from Phoenix are called Phoenicians.
Yeah, no, it's sister cities.
Yeah,
we know each other's sets. It's all good.
I highly recommend the turkey club that I got. It was a turkey club.
Great. Yeah. No, it was good. We had the perfect introduction, I think, to Cooperstown, where we got there on Friday night after driving and taking a couple stops, and we stop in at the little field that's there, and it's just open. You can walk in and just stand in the stands.
Historic Doubleday Field.
Yeah. And we walk in, and
Which is not the first baseball stadium in America.
No, apparently it only hosted like a minor league team in like World War II for like a few seasons.
Which I didn't think it was. I'm pretty sure like one of the earlier fields or most important fields in baseball history are basically just in the middle of Bed-Stuy.
Right, but it's also going to be
Center
the
of the
future
universe.
home of our, historic lower league Cooperstown town soccer team.
Bed-Stuy?
No, the
Doubleday
Doubleday
field.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were saying that you and Steve Cohen had just reached a deal to like raise 4 blocks of Bed-Stuy to bring back Union grounds.
I've hostily taken over Kingston Stockade FC and have relocated them to Cooperstown.
If baseball had an open pyramid, I would be able to accumulate the investors to do that. Just take all that housing, raise it, and the people are gonna want Union Park, which actually was one of the earliest grounds for early baseball, as we briefly learned. But anyway, we walk in, and at this ambiguously important stadium, some guys are over there, and we enter into earshot, and they're not even particularly old. They're just like maybe like 20 years older than us. Yeah. And one of them was like, "Yeah, no, dude, man, this is great. I'm really glad we made it out here because I'm just at the point where like I'm not assuming I'm gonna like get to stuff. Like it's like I don't know if I'm actually gonna do it later. Like I gotta just go do everything before it's too late. So I'm glad we went and did this, which I think is the perfect morbid kind of but undertones of optimism note that one should have when entering Cooperstown. Boys Weekend in Cooperstown.
I think
Sometimes you have to face facts.
Tagline, I'm glad that we did this. I'm not assuming I'm going to get around to things anymore. I'm at the age. I think he did say I'm at the age.
Right. I was going to say, I think we just went to Cooperstown 25 years too early, maybe. Or we have to go back in 25 years.
That's the thing, because we were kind of on the same vibes, just 20 years prematurely.
Right.
We all a few weeks ago, we were just all like, how come we've never been to Cooperstown? Like,
it's just right there.
Yeah, exactly.
It was underwhelming, to be fair.
I was expecting, it to be a little grander,
like the museum and everything.
Yeah, and the plaques were surprisingly small and kind of chintzy, to be honest. Like when because like when I like on the Sports Center specials and shit when you're growing up, they make it seem like each plaque has its own little like mausoleum practically type thing, where like it's like in its own little like nest or whatnot, but no, it's just kind of like a random little hallway with it's like it looks like employee of the month plaques.
Any park you see will have a plaque like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it was still cool. They still had a lot of cool stuff, but I was expected a little more.
The auxiliary exhibits though, the farm museum was phenomenal.
It was a different separate museum entirely.
Yes. It was great, and the Randy Johnson photo exhibit, highly recommend. Very talented photographer. Don't know why, a photographer like that had an exhibit in Cooperstown. But,
it was just that he was doing like pretty basic, like going to exotic locales to take pictures of like animals and mountains and stuff like that. Whereas we need to get him in some like hard boiled, like put him in, like the East Village with some heroin addicts and stuff,
like some Gary Winograd.
Yeah, exactly.
Like take really close pictures. Bruce Gilden, like get up with the flash type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. I would joke about comparing this to the Soccer Hall of Fame, but I can't joke about visiting Frisco. That's just too far.
No.
How would one get there anyway?
We should, though, do a trip to Dallas just to go to the Soccer Hall of Fame. We should be the first people in history to do that.
I was going to say, U.S. Soccer should like pay us the way that Qatar pays people to go visit.
We'll totally do a video brochure for the Soccer Hall of Fame.
Like you put us up in like a Holiday Inn for 2 days.
Yeah, we don't even want a nice place. Yeah.
Yeah, our water smelled like shit at this place, and we still had a great time.
Like literally like shit. We were in a.
It wasn't literally like shit.
Okay, like a farm.
It was a distracting sulfur lime. The guy did reply saying, "Thank you, this is helpful." I don't know what that means, but we're all here. We're all here None of us got sick.
Good, the sulfur water's working. Helpful to know.
Yeah. We did get to hang out with some animals.
That was pretty tough.
And
Very friendly donkey.
for the record, I am open to selling out. If anyone wants to help us sell out, hit us up. I hope we've never indicated anything opposite. I will be slightly sad if the first thing we sell out for is the Soccer Hall of Fame in Frisco. I've already seen and taken a selfie with the Dr. Joe Machnick plaque at LIU Brooklyn.
LIU,
All right?
yeah.
What else do I need to see? What could there possibly be over there?
I mean, that's first ballot Hall of Famer Dr. Joe Machnick right there.
I assume. I mean, who's to say? I don't know. They're also going to run out of, going back to the Baseball Hall of Fame, they're going to run out of plaques in like a couple years at this rate. I don't know what they're going to do.
I mean, even right now, the wall, like they have to take over like a whole other section of a wall, you know?
I think the problem with the Baseball Hall of Fame is that baseball's not going to make it as a sport until you stop seeing things like people hanging out outside the Baseball Hall of Fame talking about who's going to avoid the drop in the Premier League.
This is a true story.
Yeah, a bunch of just Canadians were hanging out. Maybe it's because they're Canadian. I don't know.
Yeah, one man in
speculating.
a France national
Talking
team
about the
jersey.
Arsenal.
One man in the Canada national team jersey at the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but there were a bunch of soccer hooligans outside the Baseball Hall of Fame, and they just, every time someone walked into the Baseball Hall of Fame, they just sneered and said, "Not a real sport."
They had no respect for war.
Yeah, you don't even kick the ball with your feet. Not a real sport. People were crying and shaking.
You don't run at least 5 kilos a game. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Back when the
That man, Alex Cesaroli.
Back when the Soccer Hall of Fame was down the road in Anianta, there used to be roving gangs of just poorly adjusted young men roaming back and forth to commit atrocities against each other in the name of their sport.
It's the real reason they had to move to Frisco.
Yeah. It was, you couldn't go anywhere at night. There was a curfew everywhere, but for those reasons, real nasty stuff.
They ran into the random flagpole in the middle of town there.
If you're idolizing them, you're missing the point. This was what that famous movie Clockwork Orange was about, famously, I think.
Yeah. It all started out of the Hall of Fame rivalries.
Yeah. Well, it was a good time overall. We made it. Got some killer books on the way back, too. That might have been the highlight. If you're ever near there, I recommend popping through Hobart.
Yeah, we will also do a video brochure for Hobart, New York.
Yeah, we'll do
offered.
Yeah.
For the Board of Tourism.
My price for that is just present that one of the bookstores seemed to have, they had evidence of a bookstore cat, but we didn't see the cat. If you just let me see the cat, that will be my price for that. I'll happily take that. It seems like that is actually kind of a more recent development, though. Like some guy just bought a couple of those things on the strip and invited in the booksellers for cheap, like in the last couple of years, which is cool.
That's what I'm trying to do when I'm up at the mountaintop.
Largesse.
Yeah.
But I also mentioned this to warn the listeners because we did acquire a couple of books that may end up haunting the airwaves of this podcast. I think you in particular, Cork, got some cautionary tales of dangerous men that might weasel their way through. Everyone brace yourself for some Jose Canseco lore coming down the pipeline. We didn't see anything about Buck.
It might have. I got the big Bob Knight expose book from the '80s, which maybe we're a few weeks too late to use analogies from that on this show about this.
We did see something about Buck, real young Buck.
We're also
we saw a thing about the old Anianta Yankees minor league team from the '80s where Buck Showalter was literally the manager. So yeah, we did see a little bit of Buck.
I almost said favorite, and that would be a poor choice of words, but I think the most enduring and iconic photo or thing that I saw at the Hall of Fame that will never leave me and would have been appropriate 2 or 3 weeks ago was the photo of Marge Schott handing a Reds jersey to the Pope John Paul II, which I'm, assume is on Gerhard Struber's wall as well. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Gerhard Struber also owns a license to that one Japanese Babe Ruth poster, which is why no one can get it.
Oh yeah, actually, I will nominate a special dishonorable mention to the store at the Hall of Fame, we were all prepared to potentially drop some money and get some cool merch, and there was none. It wasn't, you gotta up your game on the store. I can get a hat anywhere.
I got some big league chew there.
There you go. Well, one thing we did not see at the bookstore was anything about the magic of the cup, because it seems like that doesn't exist. But the Red Bulls did play a cup game as well as a game against CF Montreal this weekend. We weren't there because we were upstate for all the reasons you just listened to. We did watch the game on a tiny little phone because we did not have a camera at the cabin because we're just so boho chic. We're so, what's the word they're saying now? I feel like there's a sub. Cottagecore. Cottagecore is what we were.
Yep.
And so we watched it on a phone. So if we miss anything, that's why. It's because we were being cottagecore and more authentic than you. And but you guys made it back and went to the cup game later the week on Tuesday. I didn't go. I was my family was in town. My family was in town, and I got a bit of feedback on the podcast, which is, I think, one of the more brutal reviews we've gotten recently, which is my dad said that it was refreshing to actually hear about soccer again. Nice. Now that Struber was gone, which I was like, what do you mean? You're not listening for literally everything else but that? But no, and I do appreciate that. I forget that we do that as well sometimes. But we got two games here to discuss, and one overarching thing between these two games is that it was the return of Dante Van Zier into the team. This actually escaped us on our last episode. We didn't comment on this. This snuck up on me. Oh, how 6 weeks or 6 games pass. I guess the fact that one or two of those was applied retroactively by the time they even handed it down. But this snuck up on me very quickly. So we have not talked about this yet. I think maybe we can just lead off the show with talking about it, since it's the bridging kind of thing here. And how it's also useful exercise because how things have changed just in the time since that suspension was handed down, and how and when the event happened against San Jose, where, before recording here, we did revisit the statement that head coach Troy Lesesne gave about the decision and process that went into reintroducing Dante Van Zier into the club. And it just struck me what a different place we are. I mean, part of that, of course, you have to say, is that the vibes have shifted given the record of the team, I think, too. And with this latest results, the win against Montreal and the draw and extra time and loss on penalties against Cincinnati, the club has really still not lost a game in regular extra time since May 6th against Philadelphia, which was Garrett Struber's last game with the club. We've had 3 wins and 2 draws. I mean, if you want to call it a loss, then you can call it 3 wins, a draw, and a loss, if you count penalties. And it was a long enough time where Van Zier was out that, for me personally, I did actually sort of genuinely forget about him. And so this timing was kind of funny for me that he came back in while we were also literally away for the weekend. Yeah. So it's kind of like catching up a bit. But I'll just flip it over and say, we just revisited the clip of Troy talking about it. How do you feel about this return for Dante Van Zier? I know, Cork, you were also talking about it a bit with another podcast you guested on earlier this week. How do you feel about this decision and how it's turned out?
Well, it's kind of a thing, and I've mentioned this, on this show throughout the whole fallout from the incident, and it's just kind of colored by the fact that we don't know Dante Van Zier, and it's unfortunate. The only thing that we really do know about him so far is this incident, and it's just a very awkward process to see so much kind of labor and stress around finding a solution to this guy who has made no positive impact or hasn't really had a chance to make a positive impact on the club yet. And it's just, it was always going to be an awkward, weird process, but I think that makes it even weirder. I thought, especially again, getting refreshed on it just now, that Lissane's statement, lays out all the details and all the stakes, pretty well. And also, I thought, he puts really well the fact that it was a vote by the players, which I think it should have been, on whether or not to allow him back into the team. But then he also said that, that vote didn't mean the process is over, which I thought is important, that there's still work to do for him to prove what he's learned over the course of these events and what the consequences were, and to prove that he's worthy of the trust that the team and, presumably eventually the supporters will give him. And then he also, Troy Lissane also said, very, kind of astutely put that it's fine if supporters aren't okay with this and still need time to process all this and still need time to ask themselves whether Van Zier is somebody they're willing to forgive or root for or what have you. And I thought it struck a lot of the right notes. And, it's, I suppose, the most delicate way you can handle what is a pretty profoundly undelicate situation.
Yeah, I took that to mean that when I booed Van Zier at the Open Cup game, that Troy told me I could. But yeah, I think it is gonna, it is a long process. Yeah, I don't know. It just, I think it's just still to the point that maybe you were making maybe last week, Cork, that there are just a lot of weird things about the club that still linger, and we're reminded that there are, kind of seemingly issues that have not been maybe tackled, or if they are, they're being dealt with without, transparency into what's going on.
Sam, do you have anything? I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I don't know. If we were to get I don't know. I think part of how I feel, at least about Dante, of course, echoing what has already been said. There is lack of transparency, of course, but I don't know, the way it went down on the field, watching those replays over and over and over again. I know there's a rebuilding process, and support that to an extent, especially the idea that people do change. Whether or not Dante's changed in 6 weeks, I don't know. And I ultimately, personally would be perfectly fine if we were to, find him another club in the next, next few transfer windows. So I don't think my personal opinions about him have changed at all. But I do appreciate what Troy has said, and the fact that, there's hints at, support from the entire team. That's a positive sign, but all of that's to say that the whole experience still, and I think the experience with the supporters groups, has just been poor, constantly. And I don't really think that there's been any sort of, care or thought by the front office, into any of that. So, that still leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I kind of, as Brit mentioned, I spoke about some of this earlier on a Seattle podcast previewing this weekend's game, where in a pure kind of real politics sense of what it is, taking all of the very important human element out of it and just purely what Van Zier's kind of status and stock is as, an asset to be moved or not at this point. And I kind of said that it was sort of the ugliest, I guess, example of the drawback of the corporate ownership setup. And what, we've gathered over the years is that, there's a lot of moving parts to make any transfer happen with this club. It's not even so much that the club is cheap or the money's never there or anything. It's that there's just a lot of different people who have to sign off on anything that happens with this club. And, Lord knows we've commented on how that's a problem with the managers, and, it's also a problem with, getting players transferred in and out. And I just don't think that there's a whole, whether or not there should be is certainly a good debate to have. But I think, just assessing what the situation is, I think there's not a lot of appetite within the Red Bull organization and the purse holders, whoever they are, to sign off on another multi-million-dollar real reshuffle of the striker personnel here at this club for, the second time in 6 months and like the third or fourth time in, a few years. And, that was part of the, the issue with abandoning the Klimala project as early as they decided to this past winter also. But I think it might just be that, there was a little bit of hint over the course of his suspension that maybe the club was looking for a loan, or that, Van Zier himself just wanted to hit the reset button again and go back to Europe. But, if they're going to these lengths to integrate him, and not only go to the lengths to integrate him, I think they've gone to, important lengths to make sure integrating him is the right thing, and the right thing by the rest of the team and the supporters and all that. But yeah, in the meantime, I don't think moving him out was seen as practical by the powers that be, even if moving mountains to do it would have probably been the right move.
Did he make any sort of public, maybe aside from the the canned kind of response that he had, and then from what I remember, the only kind of publicly facing comments he made were to Dutch or Belgian media, right?
Right.
In that one interview, was there? I mean, were there any other instances where he kind of came out and spoke about this to either American media or in English at any point?
Not to my knowledge, and Eric Friedlander kind of led the bullhorn for this on Twitter the other night. I think that is a problem. I think he should, even if it is just a canned staged video, there still hasn't even been that. And then, like you said, Sam, just like with the previous manager, it's terrible optics to let these people only give their side of things to European media and never really say a peep to the U.S. Just a lot of bad optics in that, even if it isn't an ugly racial incident and the fallout from it that needs to be handled.
Yeah, it's the question of a potential loan is funny. I hadn't thought about it in a while, but part of my gut reaction when you're laying that out was that, weirdly enough, I could imagine him going out on loan more easily in a scenario where Struber is still here, which on one hand, doesn't make sense, because I would think, it seems like the club kind of just didn't really care, in the scenario, especially in the scenario that Struber stayed around. But I could sort of wrap my head around it as this is the measure that needs to be done to preserve Struber's tenancy here, because there's only so much heat the club can absorb at one time, so somebody's got to take a fall. And I could see, I thought that it felt like that was maybe possible when Struber was still around, that Dante might maybe gets shipped out because Struber is permanent but also very clearly leaving in the summer. Now that that's gone, I mean, I think this has really highlighted to me, or reinforced, the importance of just communication and leadership in the head coaching position. I mean, not only there, but all the rest of the club, where I think it's still missing. But I do think the fact that Troy has taken this seriously, I think even as he was saying in his comment, a lot of what he was saying is sort of not revolutionary or particularly groundbreaking, but it just needed to be given a lengthy or thorough response. And I think that's very true. And it's something that was not happening under the previous management. And it's really noticeable now that we actually do have it. At no point was this taken as a really serious incident previously. Like to have someone just talk about this in depth and navigate a couple different points and take it seriously really feels like a big difference. And initially when reviewing his comments, I was going to say, yeah, none of it really stuck out to me as in any particular lines popping out. But that towards the end, he did say, that this was like a hateful thing that Dante said. And he made a mistake, and there's consequences for him because of that, and there's consequences for everyone else, which is something I think was nice to hear clarification on and just laid down and not kind of equivocate like Struber did before and about, it was a complicated moment where I got contrasting pieces of information, just saying, no, it was fucked up and it was wrong, and there were consequences for it. And I do think the point, that it's understandable if people never get around to supporting him makes sense, because I think it seems to reflect to me an environment where he's saying like, yeah, you know what, Dante, maybe people are never going to cheer for you at this club, and that's because of your actions. That's because of something you did. That's your fault. I'm sure he doesn't say it in those words, but it is his fault that people don't trust him and are not going to like him. And it sounds like his reintroduction of the club has been put on the premise that that's a fact of life, and it's a fact that Dante has created. It's not the supporters. I think this is important the way it was framed, to emphasize that it's not the supporters' fault for being, immature or kind of mad. It's very much Dante's own consequences that he sowed himself. Which I think is the only way you could possibly move forward here. And for me personally, I think it's kind of the scenario where I never am going to be enthusiastic supporter of this player. I don't think I'm really going to be ever properly excited to see him on the pitch. We're not ending the podcast and refusing to talk about the Red Bulls because he's still here. But I think, the sort of mature and very deliberate approach outlined by the manager does, meet the bar for me for now. But Dante still has to go quite a while to get me excited to see him on the pitch. And if I had to guess right now, I wouldn't bet that I will ever be really excited to see him, even if he does score a volley to goal. I mean, I'll be happy that we tied the game, but I'm not going to be happy that it's him who scored it. I'm not going to be happy that he's, wearing our shirt. I don't know if I'll ever have fond feelings for the guy. And I think it's great that Troy has acknowledged that makes sense. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. And Dante Vanzier actually was a funny kind of bridge for this week as well, because he ends up appearing in both games, first as a sub on Saturday against Montreal, and then starting on Tuesday. And does appear that when it comes to him playing the game, maybe the only touch he can make is on a volley straight in the air.
Yeah.
Which will be interesting to see how that develops.
It's weird because it's like, I mentioned this to you, Cork, that he's kind of Tom Barlow-esque in that he kind of does a lot of like the right runs. He's in the right places. He receives the ball on the right foot, and then he just doesn't have the execution to really pull it off, or doesn't have the speed to get to the ball he has, or misplaces a touch just a little bit. Like, it's weird because like as a player, he's just like failing the eye test somehow, like very slightly on everything.
I mean, that's been kind of the weird subtext of all that's gone on with Vanzier, is that he's just not been terribly impressive on the field outside of, I guess, as we'll get into, balls that are in the air. It's that adds to the kind of muck of this whole situation, in that even before the incident against San Jose, it was a very underwhelming, kind of honeymoon for him once he was actually getting on the field. And mind you, it's after 3-4 weeks of not really being a full-time professional soccer player and having to get thrown back into the mix. But still not seeing the pieces come together in these 2 appearances where he's come back into the team. It is interesting, I guess, if we're just going to go into the bit that his goal against, it was Columbus, right? The game that we won, and then the one game that we won all year under Struber, and then this volley against Cincinnati the other night, and then multiple other chances he had in his start against Cincinnati. It's like he's only dangerous when the ball is in the air.
The overhead he took right after the racist incident.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I mean, multiple of them had shades of Letitia all over them, and it's just like talk about the worst parallel you could have as far as extroverted strikers. It's just, I mean, I've kind of harped on it a bit on Twitter, both before and after the incident, where it's just kind of like, I continue to not see, obviously I don't, agree with Struber's judgment on this and a lot of things, but also just, Schneider's oversight of the situation and just seeing this player as worth not only, the $5 million that it cost to buy Van Zier himself, but, the effectively $3 million in sunk cost in selling off Klimala only a year and a half after you brought him in, and decided to make him the scapegoat for the team's scoring problems. Effectively, an $8 million investment into a guy who appears to just be slower, smaller, more prone to fitness issues, more prone to personal issues, certainly, than the previous striker you had, who, seemed, as we certainly argued, to be more of, he certainly wasn't the only player not scoring before and after he left. Continues to be very confusing, the entire kind of impetus for bringing Van Zier in on those terms in the first place. And certainly the incident made it even more confusing. And, on top of, the trust he needs from a social standpoint for supporters to believe in him and get, excited about him, he hasn't really done much on the pitch to do that. And, hopefully, these volleys, as we're pointing out, are his way of kind of stringing it along until he can, one would hope, put the rest of his game together, because he hasn't shown much of it so far.
And look, I think I saw glimpses in the Open Cup game. We were being in the front row for that game was odd, because I never see that angle, I guess. Really revealed a lot of
pretty hard to watch the game, honestly.
Yeah, but you see different things in different ways, right. Kind of like being that low. But I really felt like It shows that Dante Van Zier is kind of a limited player if, I don't know, the manager's thinking, hey, like a guy of this stature, skill set should play central forward and Tom Barlow should play winger kind of in my setup, or like play the wide midfielder.
It is interesting that he, mind you, it doesn't seem like there's any set formation this year, even since Lassane came in, or was promoted. But it was interesting in the preseason and first couple weeks that it seemed like the team was being set up so that Barlow or Burke could play in the front, kind of like crasher striker role, and then Van Zier was going to clean up underneath him. That's at least some kind of concept and idea about how the team was going to attack. It ended up getting abandoned pretty quickly, but that's a scenario where I could see the vision of bringing in a player like Van Zier and getting rid of a player like Klimala if you're going to have that setup and have that striker in that role. If Van Zier is going to be expected to kind of lead the line and be, the focal point in the final third, I just continue to not see how that's going to work based on the eye
it's like we
test of
traded for
him.
the wrong player, or like
Right.
we just got really bad timing in terms of how things are working out. But yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of limited in the way that he plays, but at the same time, I saw glimpses of his Tolkien. I think really picked up on his runs really well. I think a lot of guys are kind of noticing the way that he is moving. I think his movement overall is like one of a dangerous player, but it's just the link up afterwards or the touch kind of lets him down. He's not really necessarily like that fast to be like a winger if we needed him to be either, which is kind of like frustrating because if you look at him, he kind of looks like he could be either like that kind of player, but he's not.
Yeah, it is interesting now that the side appears to be, actually trying to score goals proactively. It is interesting to see the effects or kind of the outfall from how the squad has been shaped in Struber and Schneider's vision before, where it does feel like we have a lot of these sort of vertical or crashing type forward players, but nothing underneath really to provide the creativity or linking play still. And it's been such a revolving door, I guess, and the injuries continue to make the lineups a bit of an unclear situation. It will be interesting to see how this kind of plays out as we get a larger sample size and get a feel for how this team might move forward. On Saturday against Montreal, we scored 2 goals. One was from a set piece. Andres Reyes kind of putting in back a rebound off a corner. The second was a bit more of playing through the middle. We see us recover the ball in midfield, play very directly straight up the pitch.
It looked a lot like the type of goal that you saw Gerhard Struber's teams in Europe score. When Ross Haley and I first kind of broke down the tape on Barnsley and Wolfsberger when Struber was hired, it was direct and through the middle, but with like short passes and quick little 1-2s and runs. Something that you never really saw earnestly attempted by this team under Struber outside of little spurts here and there. Meanwhile, this goal was, honestly, I mean, with including with Burke himself and the VAR checked, it almost looked too good to be true that he would be offsides for it. But it was nice little bit of combination between Fernandez and Yearwood coming up through the middle. There's a little back heel and just some, again, like we keep saying on this show, even before Struber left. I mean, just kind of basic intuitive combination play that any group of professionally trained soccer players should be able to do if they're not being discouraged from doing so. And yeah, it leads to Kasser is kind of picking up the ball, and as much as I malign the idea of him being the team's creative fulcrum up top, he does a nice little shimmy where he kind of fakes a shot but then delivers it in to Burke, who himself does a nice little drag around the keeper and puts it in. And just sort of a prototypical sort of sexy vertical goal, that you would expect a soccer team that is trying to play the way we profess to would score more often. So hopefully that's the beginning of more of a pattern rather than just another isolated moment like we've learned to treat these kinds of goals as.
Yeah, Luca on Twitter made a clip of that second goal highlighting how Omir kind of pinches in early to start that play, which I think in his opinion is saying is something that kind of wasn't happening. He just, and it is familiar to like how the Red Bulls used to play with the pressing system, under Marsh and even parts of Armis, where like anticipating and seeing that the team is challenging for the ball in the midfield and then running into space to provide an option to quickly transition. Something that just was not happening previously. I think previously guys like Omir were spread out and more focused on potentially pressing further up the pitch at a future moment when the ball was back up there again. The question of how the ball was going to get back up there is a question mark. But it was refreshing to see players running towards the ball a bit more to provide that opportunity. Even though I think there is still work to get the team a little bit more fluid and combining. But it is a sight for sore eyes still, nonetheless. But yeah, the goal we conceded against Montreal is off a set piece. I guess that you could say it's off of a second ball of sorts. Not kind of the same kind of thing that we've been talking about previous season, though. It's just a ball headed to the far post, headed across.
Yeah, it was a design thing that worked, and Montreal executed it well.
Kind of get out jumped at the far post by Dylan Nealis, I think, gets out jumped, and then Andres Reyes actually does get a touch on it at the end, but it hits off the Montreal player and in. I think, but that's an interesting case though, because that's the kind of goal that a team will give up over a season. And 2 months ago, or a month ago, I don't know, when was Struber fired? We give up that goal because shit happens, and we don't score because we don't score, and we lose 1-0, I think, is what happens. And I think that is a good example of a goal that even if you've got a pretty elite defense and pressing system, things are going to fall through the cracks. There are going to be singular moments of failure or well-executed set places and everything. And you have to be able to show up and play and outscore overcome it. And I think, the team is not doing anything groundbreaking or revolutionary so far, but just kind of showing up with the willingness to play. And I think also accept that mistakes are going to happen maybe, and accept that you can also make the other team make mistakes has been much more refreshing to watch and root for, personally. It is still kind of weird to exercise those muscles again. I feel like my enthusiasm and just enthusiasm was tamped down by Struber so much, telling us to fuck off and not be enthusiastic about this team. It is weird to potentially face the prospect of excitement or even actually dread in its own way, being actually nervous about getting scored on instead of it just being kind of a blasé fact of life that, might happen, once every 2 weeks or something. It's a new experience. Again, this season, we're still getting used to it. The rest of the game is pretty boring. When we were revisiting the game, we forgot that all the goals were scored by the 38th minute or so. I think the only other thing I have for this game to remark on was how Dante came in and looked quite poor, and we've already hit that note. Anything else from the Montreal game we want to touch on before we discuss the Open Cup? I think there's a couple of lineup things that maybe could be interesting, which is that Corey Burke gets the start, plays 67 minutes. Peter Stroud gets another appearance, and Wookie Carmona also got the start here.
Love that Peter Stroud. That boy looks good.
Yeah, looks real solid.
Yeah, coming along.
He might be that creative link in the midfield a little bit. He's kind of a little bit more box to box.
It'll be an interesting battle between him and Edelman's with the U20s in the World Cup right now, obviously, but it's a rare situation to have two kind of pretty blue chip midfield prospects like that, to have a straight up battle to prove which one can grab the role and make it their own over the next few months, few years. We'll see.
It does make me wonder about Frankie Amaya as well when he gets back to fitness.
Right.
Frankie had a great season last year in a more reserved role on the pitch. But I think, especially before he got here and in the first couple months he got here, I think he was being considered a little bit further up the pitch. If Stroud and Edelman do continue to kind of develop and be promising further back in the midfield, I wonder if it opens an opportunity for Frankie to maybe play further up the pitch. I don't know. It's a good situation to have, though, an embarrassment of riches. Adding to that in the midfield is also Drew Yearwood, who got another start sort of playing in that. I don't know. What do you call what he's doing?
Actually, on the Seattle podcast, I said he's not really a 10, but he is playing very much an attack support role. He's running, very, very visibly running and sprinting to get in behind the defenders once the ball has been played into the final third, and to help the strikers and get the team on the front foot. But it's not quite, as I keep lamenting, whether it's Yearwood, whether it's Cáceres, whether it's Carmona, there's not really a player who can kind of hold the ball and create in the final third and be that kind of hub. Now that the team's going to be playing through the middle more and trying to combine more, we still do not have that kind of, sort of game-breaking 10 in that role, especially now that Caden Clark was discarded. And, I think it would have been much wiser to have, tried to keep Klimala in place and then use the money that was spent on Van Zier to finally have a, more senior attacking midfielder who can, kind of piece the rest of the team together. But as we've kind of found out, piecing the team together was not really the priority for the first few months of this season.
It's funny to think about Caden Clark too. I was thinking about this over the weekend that, remember when Struber first joined, and I guess that first season was still when Kaku had just left. I mean, revisiting our favorite fact that Struber actually did coach Kaku for one game. Yeah. Hilarious to think about. But the sort of top line question that everyone was kind of thinking is like, where is the creativity, or where's the potential spark in midfield going to come for on this team? Is Kaku going to be able to hand the keys over to Caden Clark? Is Caden Clark really going to be able to pick up? Because, he rose those last couple months of 2020.
He scored the Golazzos, but it was a little... Yeah, going into that season, it was very much like, are we really going to rely on Caden Clark in that area of the pitch? But then the first few, couple months of that season before his appendicitis, we were chugging.
Well, I think we were also distributing the responsibilities a bit. But I was, to take my turn playing a somewhat sarcastic Struber's advocate, to give him some credit for some things he is successful at his tenure here. Very successful at resetting fan expectations, I think, where we really stopped wondering about that question of like, that it feels like a totally different time, a totally different world to even think about like that transition of like Kaku to what's his name? And Minnesota guy. Yeah. Cade Cowell, is that a guy? Caden Clark.
No, it was a progression of Kaku to Caden Clark to now nobody.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you want to consider, maybe Carmona graduating a little bit more, but like I said, I don't think Carmona is a classic 10 the way Clark and Kaku were.
Right. And to your point earlier, I remember what I forgot, is that Drew Yearwood playing that advanced role, he's definitely not like the 10 or the facilitator. It seems like he's actually on the end of a lot of these transitions or these attacks, the way that it's designed. Yeah. Like he's the one designed to be taking that last ball or finishing. So. Yeah,
I don't think we have that player in the squad currently. And
I mean, I feel like it's supposed to be CCJ. He just doesn't like... I think fit the mold really.
Right. I guess it's also funny thinking back because I think that the squad was sort of intentionally built this way to not have that player, that we didn't necessarily need it, because Lucanius is sort of the last midfielder we brought in, but he's more of a inverted winger type, like, and he did play a little bit on Tuesday, right?
He looked pretty good on Tuesday.
Well, that's a relief because I've been holding out hope that
that's one of those things where what I was thinking is like, I'm really curious what Luquinhas looks in like a more free flowing kind of attack minded team, and I thought that he fit in a lot better just because, like we're saying, any natural soccer player seems to be playing more better if it's a natural soccer.
I mean, they're also getting closer together, which I think is going to be necessary for Luquinhas to be a better fit. It is funny to think that the story on Lucanius was, I guess, that Struber personally remembered him from his career in Europe. I don't. It doesn't scan to me. The way he was using him and his skill set, it doesn't really make sense for why he would want him.
Well, in Poland, there are Brazilian inverted wingers. I'm doing the Yummy Park meme.
Not to go off on too much of a sidebar, but I remember Struber's first press conference after the playoff game that he parachuted in for, bizarrely, where one of his first bizarre answers of his tenure was, somebody asked him, "What were your first impressions of MLS, your first game and stuff like that?" Oh yeah, and he was just like, "Oh, I learned it's a very, impressive league, challenging league with a lot of South Americans. It's interesting how many South Americans are in this league." And it makes me think that like some of these Brazilians we signed was him kind of just thinking like, oh, well, if I just do my hardo mechanical European pressing tactics and then sprinkle a few Brazilians on top of it.
Yeah.
Gangbusters. And then when that just didn't automatically work, he kind of lost the plot.
He just looked at it and said, "Oh, this guy's from Brasilia? That's like extra Brazil. Perfect."
Super Brazil.
And
Yeah.
Didn't he found out it was a Star Wars planet much later.
He still doesn't know. He still hasn't had that learnings moment.
But I will say, like, a lot of my doubts about Luquinhas' link up were alleviated a little bit after watching him come back on Tuesday.
I mean, hey, he looked good the first month he was here.
So, maybe like, maybe just like all the soccer instincts that were zapped off need to return, and like colors coming back to the world.
Right. But we can use this as a segue to Tuesday, because I'm relying on you guys for Tuesday. So like we go down in regulation on Tuesday. We score the last minute equalizer. How did we look though on Tuesday beyond that? From revisiting the highlights, it looked to me that we did control the run of play a bit, but it also is hard to tell how much of that is Cincinnati taking their one goal and closing up shop.
I mean, Cincinnati didn't really have their big guns. Like Vasquez did not travel for this game. Brenner is in the process of being sold off. And just kind of Acosta was there, and Acosta kind of was the, main character for most of their danger. It's just, one of the more quality players in the country, as a lot of people know. But
Him and Kubo, really.
Him and Kubo, and Nwadobo, their defensive midfielder, is just a very quality player I've always been impressed by. And, team that was very fluent and adept at playing kind of a, chicken game, just sort of waiting it out, picking very rare opportunities to send numbers forward. As we've commented on playing Cincinnati in the playoffs last year and just throughout, since they've been under Pat Noonan and started to improve a bit, they're a team that basically sits back and then tries to play hero ball with their, front three, and they do it very well. And in this game, with only one of their usual front three, they were, playing an even more limited version of that, which is practical and sensible in a cup game on the road. The stat line shows it, the eye test showed it, that it was just kind of us controlling the ball in waves and them kind of sitting back. But like I said, and like I've said on the show, and like I said on Twitter, night of the game, I mean, it continues to be a situation where, when there is resistance, when teams are packing numbers behind the ball against us, we really don't have that creative edge to really spread it open. We have, a few very good individuals and good dribblers who can provide moments on the outside. And that was where a lot of our danger was. You saw Harper, have some good looks. You had, some of the few moments where, Barlow was actually out playing basically, as I called it, the Drillo Olsen wide target man role. But, doing well enough with his energy and, just ability to kind of, make the ball stick in the final third. And, just kind of a game where it was, like a lot of our games this year, where it was a lot of just, ugly, kind of messy, hopeful shots by us that added up to a huge tally by the end of the game. But not a lot of, kind of carved out danger. And, eventually, get the goal, near the end, with the Van Zier volley, which, bittersweet, as we've already touched on, to see that be the kind of turning point. But then, after that, you go into, I guess some people call it the magic of the cup, but I call it, just the great crapshoot of extra time and penalties. And we did not end up on the right end of it, despite some clever lineup card work by Lassane.
Well, I mean, we had a lot of contributions from the squad in this game because we called up Avante Mullings again, got him to play. Matt Nasita got his first professional start.
That was his first start.
First appearance. He didn't
appearance.
start.
Yeah, it's an extra little dose of fan service, or whatever you want to call it, that Coronel comes in as a field player for Nocita, who has a sub himself already.
Yeah.
When I was reviewing the game later and I saw the clip of Coronel coming on, I assumed it was that he was going to come in to be the goalkeeper, but that they were just subbing him on, and it was like more expeditious to sub him on as a field player, and then he would switch once regulation ended. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize the idea was for him to take a pen, and I'm disappointed that he didn't get to. Like I guess Troy said he was going to be sixth. Why not put him in your top five?
I really have to imagine, considering he's pretty large even by goalkeeper standards, that Coronel's penalty would be one of like the Joe Hart style penalties or Kevin Pressman penalties, where he's just like absolutely smashing it as hard as he can.
Yeah.
Like he's kicking it 200 yards, but the net's only like 20 in front.
Which is kind of like
so.
what the CCJ penalty was.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, but
I guess I don't. I have respect for my own eyes, so I haven't watched this in years. But how did Manuel Neuer take penalties? Did he try to smack the shit out of it, or was he always?
It feels probably pretty normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, very German to be very normal about penalties, right?
It is disappointing that we didn't get to see him one, but maybe it's poetic.
You know whose fault it is? Dante Van Ziers.
That Dante is the man who misses, and yeah, I think that kind of sums it all up. I think that's about right. I think
Steve had a good the Capo Metro Capo had a good tweet about it. It's like we could just it's Dante's fault that we had to be cold for 30 extra minutes.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, he could have just made that second volley and won it in regulation, but no.
But I will say it's funny that Troy has his initials because he still has yet to get an L in his competitions.
Oh, the TL?
Yeah.
He just loves the timeline.
Yeah.
Timeline Troy.
Yeah, I guess he just didn't. He didn't. Yeah, the second he talks about Twitter experts, it's fucking over. So over. Yeah, I guess it's not a loss. I don't know. I mean, we do exit the cup. I guess we would have played Pittsburgh or something in the next round, but so it goes.
I would have loved to play Pittsburgh away.
Everything about this season is house money at this point. As
right?
We kind of put.
Exactly.
I wish
Open Cup is a fake tournament again. Thank God.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to myself that I would have gone to Pittsburgh on a weekday. If it were a weekend, I might have gone because that's one of those cities where I'm like, yeah, I'm not even gonna disrespect it with what goes on there because I kind of know a little bit of what goes on there. Right. But I'd be down. Pittsburgh and Baltimore are like my two east-ish cities, that I've yet to hit up. So I would love it if, the Magic of the Cup and Pro Rel Magic could get a little bit of seed money in Crystal Palace, Baltimore again. Or what was the other one they had? It doesn't matter. I don't know. Crystal Palace, Baltimore felt right, though. Something about it. There probably was a Crystal Palace somewhere in Baltimore. People loved those things in like the 1880s.
In cities like Baltimore.
Yeah. But yeah, so it goes. As Cork said, house money.
Now on to the next real cup tournament, which is Leagues Cup, obviously.
Oh God. Yeah, is that starting soon?
Pretty soon.
Yeah, in the summer.
That would be kind of funny if we won that.
It's a real cup to me until
I just wish it were like Intertoto Cup style. You know, I could get into Intertoto Cup run at this point.
That's coming soon.
Next one up is Saturday, Seattle. First time we've played Seattle in 4 years. First time, we don't get 10:30 kickoffs much nowadays.
Yeah. When I did the No Saudiitis Seattle podcast with Jeremiah Oshan earlier, and Jeremiah Oshan, who was my former boss at SB Nation, and we remarked on it, how this is the first time we've ever done either of each other's podcasts because during my entire run as OAM editor, we never played the Sounders. And Jeremiah actually ran the numbers after we got off the phone. That we were saying like it has a really good chance of being the longest gap between two MLS teams ever playing each other. It's got to be. He ran the numbers, and apparently it's number 4 on the list.
Wow.
Of longest gap between two MLS teams playing each other. So
Were we in any of the other ones too?
that I don't know, but yeah, just COVID, expansion, just a lot of things, combining to hold these two. I mean, honestly, two of the biggest clubs in the country from playing each other in a really long time.
Honestly, it's funny thinking about it because I think we stopped doing a balanced schedule pretty early on, but it was still in like 15 through 17, 18-ish. It was still like you played most other teams in the conference,
even if it was only one away or one home.
It was like 2 in conference, 1 away for most. There were like maybe 3 or 4 teams you didn't play.
I think it was like 18 was the perfect season where we played all the East teams twice and all the West teams once or something like that.
Should have just ended it there.
Right.
But it's funny because like from that 15 to 18-ish period, the golden era, Seattle and us did kind of feel like a marquee matchup that I always like looked forward to on the calendar. And I remembered I remember there being in those seasons, like anticipation of like, oh, we've got a big road trip coming up. Like, are we going to
being like a big litmus test for like the top of the league and who the big dogs were.
Yeah.
And
like,
Western Conference.
it was the same. I think it was the same road trip as when we went to Portland that one year and we had the Robles double save up there. I can't exactly remember the moment in the Seattle game that year, but it was a big trip. And then there was, another year where it was part of a road trip up to Vancouver where I can't remember if this was 15 or 18, but it was really like we really needed to get at least a point or win up there. And there was like the Eric Hurtado game where the guy could not put it away. For a litany of reasons, there's not kind of anticipation or like date circling on the calendar like there used to be. But I do think that the growth of the league is definitely one of them. This kind of used to be something, 2 marquee bigger clubs that it was a good opportunity to see how we were measuring up. I guess they did miss the playoffs last year.
Yeah, they broke their streak.
We do have the longest streak now, which I think was always sort of a fitting way to describe the two clubs. But yeah, I'm curious, did they have any questions? I mean, obviously, other than Van Zier, did they have any questions or impressions about us that seem noteworthy or surprising?
Surprised as I think, pretty much everybody around the league was until Struber was let go, that, the underlying numbers in XG were, so lopsided in our favor, and it could not be turned into actual results. Which, I used as kind of a jump off into a lot of what I said, what we said earlier about the lack of a, real creative hub. But also just, the general foibles of the way Struber set the team up and his approach to game planning and, just that, I think people... to go back to your line, Brit, people really have kind of become what goes on there about the New York Red Bulls the last few years, because it's been weird enough for us. I can't imagine how disorienting it is for other people to see, a team that, like we said, is maintaining the playoff streak, never really, until this season, certainly, bottoming out to the end of the table or anything like that, but still just always seeming to be in kind of a malaise. I think, people are kind of confused by that with this club. So, yeah.
Which it is fun. I mean, as we were remarking on more and more towards the end of Struber, it seemed like that might have been sort of the inertia where the club was finally getting some sort of residual, oh, well, they'll be back kind of attitude of the Red Bulls are never that bad. So it's like, why are you guys giving us credit now of all times, That said, it is, we are in 11th place now in the East, with 16 points. I think if we And look who's above us with 16 points is NYCFC. So they must not be doing great either. But
Cushing
slowly
zone is
making
real.
our way up. Anything? I mean, it's also just been a while to think about like a cross country away trip and like what we can expect from that. I mean, one,
Right.
there have just been fewer, and two, as we discussed at length in previous episodes, there was just that period where you no longer expected anything from any game. What is the expectation here back more to the traditional mold of like a point away being decent?
Well, Seattle's kind of had a topsy-turvy year themselves, dealing with a lot of injuries and personnel issues. And, I think they're kind of in the same situation we were, or maybe still are in, where, they don't really know what to expect from their team week to week. So, I mean, maybe a situation where we do start to become, again, the kind of team that catches other teams napping in their home ground, whether we catch teams napping, not expecting us to be that efficient, pressing and turning around transitions. Maybe this is the moment where this team starts to, funnily enough, for 11th place, start to feel like one of the bigger teams in the league again. Getting a scalp like this on the road, even from a Seattle team that's kind of out of sorts, would be a pretty big deal.
What's the outlook on some of our injured players?
We saw
Lucchinius coming back, but anything on Morgan and others?
Lassane said that Morgan could be back for Saturday, so I would imagine that would be sub minutes if anything. But still that is coming around the corner gradually. Amaya will be back pretty soon, it sounds like, too. And I mean, all that as well could piggyback on a win in Seattle to kind of get this team feeling confident and like it can take on whatever this league throws at it again. I keep saying, I don't think this squad is perfect. I think there's some issues that need to be fixed, and I don't know if there's a route to fixing them that quickly at this point. But as far as reaching the ceiling of its potential, the team is making steps towards doing that, and I think a win against Seattle would certainly be evidence of more of that.
I feel like like it seems like we're kind of on the rebound in terms of both injuries, form, spirits. I get the sense from the players that they're actually fighting a little bit for Troy, and that it seems like they like him to some extent, and that sometimes that motivation is just what you need to win, right? Well, on the road,
it will also be interesting to see what the shape is up top or what the personnel is up top. I don't know what the Burke Van Zier plan is if the idea is to play both, if maybe just to platoon them, so to speak, whether the Barlow out wide experiment will endure, or whether Morgan getting fit and Lucchinius getting fit changes that. There's a lot of pieces moving here right now. We could probably go on and on and on about all the different permutations, but this is a potentially one of the first weeks where we're getting some pieces back more fit and don't have a midweek game looming where you could just see the normal or a more standard New York Red Bulls lineup that we might see going forward. So I'm looking forward to getting some glimpse of that, whether that's just seeing who's the first choice forward is, or maybe potential other sources of creativity. It will also, I think, be very interesting to see if Yearwood plays in the support kind of attacking role still, or if maybe that's sort of a bridge. It will still be weeks to know for sure, but I think just going into this, trying to go for a point, I'll be satisfied. Getting 3 would be wonderful. But this could well be Troy's first loss at the helm, and would be a more sort of forgivable or normal one in this case. Seattle is in poor form. They've had 4 losses out of 5, but they're still second in the West. So with the travel, with the turf, with everything sort of out of whack, it wouldn't be the weirdest thing, but I think it'll also depend how we look,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of putting it, that this would be the first time in a while that, we can have a loss and it can kind of be like, that's just kind of how, it's a 34 game season, you're playing against a big team on the road, and that's just kind of how it is sometimes. So, yeah, slowly but surely nice to be, getting into that sort of feeling about games again. It feels weird. The muscle memory's not all there, but, slowly but surely.
Yeah, really talking house money for sure this game, I think.
House money. From salad to house money, the 2023 story. That was my favorite moment of the Hall of Fame, was seeing Eckersley's plaque.
Oh, yeah. We commemorated. We paid our respects.
We actually scattered the ashes of salad at his plaque.
Actually, they paid their respects to us. The Hall of Fame and
That's
the
true. They did
podcasters.
have a radio man, a podcast exhibit, which is the most important thing to honor. Well, this ended up being a meaty one, but I think we covered good stuff. Anything else to add before we sign off? All right.
Let's go Red Bulls.
Whoa. Till then.
It's Alex!